Do you want to do the intro?
We have a co-moderation role for just to inform the audience. So Philip and myself are trying to coordinate. And the idea was it's about seed funds and seed funding, put it that way. And we realized when we were preparing that we actually have all different models. So we will simply kick off by explaining who we are, what our respective organizations do, and then we will take it from there. And please feel free anytime to jump in with a question. So maybe we just start from that side, explaining who we are. And,
right, then take over actually, and for my behalf, or the behalf of the High-Tech Renaissance, I just explain shortly how we are positioned, what our purpose is, and what we actually do. So I'm a trained biologist working since 4 years for the High-Tech Renaissance, and we are a pure-play seed financing fund. We are backed by the German Ministry of Economics, which have in the current fund 2/3 of the capital, but 1/3 of the capital in our fund, which is over 300 million right now, comes from private sources. And this is not only the big companies like BASF, Bayer, Boehringer that support us, but also, especially in the field of IT or in the field of engineering, the so-called German Mittelstand. So medium-sized companies with maybe €1 billion revenue that use us as strategic investment to participate in the German innovation landscape and see it as a strategic investment. Strategic because we are limited to a certain stage of investment. We are limited to the seed stage, as I said, which we define that the company is not older than 3 years, that it collected not more than 500,000 euros in dilutive funding, and has also a link to Germany, which can be a subsidiary, participation in clinical trials, development, but there need to be some activities in Germany, since it's tax money involved, and then we are able to invest globally, but it's more normal to us to have a cross-border investment like with the Netherlands or Switzerland. So here the panel is about the seed stage investment, and maybe the other ones follow on with their describing their funds and how they actually do the investment.
Sounds good. Thanks, Philip. Pierre Socha, Amadeus Capital, based in Cambridge, in the UK. Amadeus has been around for about 20 years. We invest in technologies, early stage and growth stage. We always tend to run 2 funds or the 2 activities in parallel, but then only focus on the early stage today. The funds are usually around 50 to 100 million pounds, raised every 5 years or so. We focus on technologies really ranging from new materials, computing, cybersecurity, all the way down to healthcare. Given the range, we will very unlikely invest in therapeutics. It's usually much more on the hardware, software side of things. So we end up with medical technologies and digital health as the big thematics for healthcare. We've done quite a few investments over the years in the space, from instrumentations. We've done Solexa back in the days, now Illumina, so very much on the sequencing side of things. We're looking more and more into gene synthesis as well. We've done investment in ophthalmology, wound care, portable dialysis systems. So this is really on the instrumentation and medtech side. And data-wise, it goes from genomics for rare disorders with Congenica out of the Sanger Center in Cambridge, all the way down to drug repurposing using omics platforms, and a marketplace for genomic data with repositories. So it's pretty broad. Ticket-wise, first check are usually around 1 to 2 million pounds. We would put 5-6 million aside per company. It's a classic GPLP structure, so we will invest in 20 to 30 companies, but in the end it's really a winner-take-all from a reserve standpoint. So the 5 million is likely to vary drastically depending on the performance of the positions. We can go as low as £50,000. This is what we call a proof of concept investment. It's literally an entrepreneur and an idea or prototype. It's part of rounds that may be few £100,000, we wouldn't lead, but we would definitely back the person. And from time to time, some of these investments then graduate into the main funds. In the last one, we've made about 25 or 30 of these proof of concepts, and 2 or 3 went into proper Series A later on. The vast majority of the investments, we do come at the classic stage of the company raising 1, 2, 3 million. We would do possibly half. What else? We invest primarily in the UK, but it's not exclusive. It's just that we tend to get a very good deal flow for the spaces we back. So we're based in Cambridge. We've got most of our investments between Oxford, London, Cambridge, and then the one-offs in Scotland or Bristol, depending on the centre of excellences we work with. We've backed a number of entrepreneurs multiple times. I'll stop there. Very open for questions.
Yeah. My name is João Ribas. I'm an associate with Novo Seeds, part of Novo Holdings. So Novo Holdings is the holding company of the Novo Nordisk Foundation, and the foundation itself is a charitable foundation that gives money away for mostly academic research, but a few other areas. As Novo Seeds, we start by investing in a very early stage. That can even be company creation, and we continue through the lifetime of the company investing in that idea. We invest in biotech, so therapeutics, a little bit in medtech, we also do industrial biotech, and we have a special fund dedicated to anti-infectives. And at the same time, we also are LPs in other funds, so we don't have to raise funds continuously. We're an evergreen structure, and that changes a little bit the timelines that we have, I guess, compared to some other funds here, like Pierre. We also have internally in-house entrepreneur in residence program. So when we create companies, we can pair them with experienced CEOs, experienced entrepreneurs that can help the scientists make the leap and make the business case. And for the company creation that we do mostly in the Nordics, we can give away, and we give 10 of these grants per year of €500,000 to really prove the key points, prove the scientific hypothesis, show that it can actually work, and then some of these graduate into companies that then we do a proper seed round and a Series A, and we continue to invest in these companies. And our geographical focus for the Novo Seeds team is all of Europe.
Well, I think it's already visible that the range of seed investing is quite broad, from 50K for a proof of concept round, what you do with the $500,000, and IT Gründer Fund defining it as not older than 3 years and not more than 500,000 raised already. As for NLC, we are even active more early than that. So we call ourselves a venture builder rather than a venture capital fund. We do invest a very small amount of money in the companies that we create, but mostly we invest sweat equity. So NLC was funded 4 years ago in Amsterdam as a venture builder, a little bit modeled after what used to be IP Group in the UK, like when they started with the idea to pick up innovations out of academic institutes, out of hospitals, from practitioners that probably in most cases come with IP, so for us that's important that they are protected, that address a very specific medical need where practitioners tell us, yes, there's a problem and this could be a solution to it. And, I mean, that quite a lot of these inventions are available, but very often nothing happens. And talking to tech transfer officers, if anyone does that once in a while, they will all confirm it, saying this is typically, it's too early for venture capital, even too early for a seed fund. There is no proof of concept yet, and even worse, there's not even a team. And in that case, NLC comes in as a venture builder. We have a fairly large organization in Amsterdam. We have an office in Munich now. We have one colleague here in Vienna. So regional focus currently is Benelux and Germany, Austria, Switzerland. We create companies in that we do not run them. We always team up with entrepreneurial managers / CEOs whom we identify in parallel to the period where we're actually evaluating the invention. We have 3 people internally on headhunting, on managing a CEO candidate pool, call it also entrepreneur in residence, different names for that type of activity. So we then, once we have such promising invention, we negotiate the license with the institute. We negotiate, talk, discuss with the inventor in which way he or she wants to be involved. It's not a requirement that the inventor go into the company, but we always want to have access and want to have at least a consulting arrangement with that person. Very nice if there's maybe a postdoc, someone who wants to join the team, that makes life easier, but it's not a prerequisite. And so then we can invest a little bit of money, but we need to go out very early on, like any other founder, basically, to talk to angels, talk to very early stage investors, try and access whatever grant money, non-dilutive is there to bring it together, bring it to life. So we're at the very, very early stage of the seed investing chain, basically.
Thank you. And I'm happy to introduce the 5th different model on how to deal with pre-seed and seed funding. I'm happy to talk about IST-Cube, and the origin of IST-Cube is IST. IST is the Institute of Science and Technology Austria. I'm not sure if you're particularly familiar with the institution. It's fairly young. It was founded 10 years ago, which in the life of a scientific institution is not terribly long. But I think the institute, which was founded very much after the model of the Weizmann Institute in Israel, has shown over the last 10 years that it was just set up in the right way, I think, and was probably also lucky. We have 55 research groups right now. I think one of the coincidences that have happened in the trajectory of the institute was that the European Research Council was pretty much founded around the same time, also a bit more than 10 years ago. And for us, the ERC is one of the major funding institutions. From our 55 research groups, 35 or something have an ERC grant, which is a pretty unique ratio in Europe. So scientifically, the institute has developed quite well, and what we thought about a couple of years ago is how can we develop the tech transfer realm, and maybe not only build a classic tech transfer office, but try to do something for the pre-seed and seed and university spin-off realm in Austria. And IST-Cube was the result. So IST-Cube is a seed fund designed to invest in spin-offs initially from Austrian research institutions. We are not limited by mandate to invest in Austria, so we can invest opportunistically beyond. But clearly now at the beginning we really want to get established in Austria. We had a first closing a year ago, so basically we are probably the youngest organization of all these here. Have made our first 3 investments. We have built a team last year. We have a fairly established, quite senior team of 4 senior partners. In chemistry competence, we have an IP and patent attorney on our team as well. And in terms of investment scope, obviously given the focus on seed and spin-off from Austrian institutions, the disciplines are quite wide, obviously. So we have certain investments in the software field. In life sciences, we have done basically one thing in DNA synthesis. We did one in medical imaging and learning, and are really open to look at basically anything that comes out from Austrian universities.
So that's a quite broad range of diversity, but still, so what is common is the one point where the first capital is being put into the company to the people. Can you elaborate a little bit about the time point where you think, okay, that is worth an investment, or depending on the stages it is, or maybe the 2 or 3 time points. So for us, we always say that we start with the proof of principle. So we need to have a laboratory model, we need to see that it's actually working, and so we try to spend the seed phase towards the proof of concept, so that other ones are actually understanding that there's something of value being built. So can you say where your steps are?
Yeah, it's very similar to us. We can, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we can go as early as a personal idea. The vast majority will be beyond that with early clinical data, for instance, in the case of life science. possibly a couple of early deals, let's call them pilots, with 1 or 2 clients. And then what really tends to be the big trigger is the team that is being assembled around the project, basically. Are they already on board full-time, or advisors, etc.? People who give us the comfort that essentially they know the market really well, and we can build talent around them. They're also part of ecosystems where the resources will be available, and that's one of the challenge sometimes. If you look at even UK, which is a market I know quite well today, for what we do, actually it's very much in the southeast. There are a couple of universities spread, but in terms of people, it's really down there. So we always push and want to go to Manchester, Scotland, etc. We definitely find great propositions, but for them to attract people, back in the north, for instance, is quite a challenge. So geography is really key. And as much as we want to push, we also need to make sure we can, the proposition can attract enough people. So I think it's really fundamentally, the team around it, and then the usual, boxes need to be ticked. IP needs to be in place, so properly filed. We need to look at the right market size, dynamic pricing, or at least have some idea as to how the product would eventually end up in the hands of a consumer. But that's more the box ticking side of things. A lot of it is about looking at the team in the eyes, literally, once the rest is done, and say, yeah, these guys could really pull it. So this is where we may need to strengthen, etc. But down the line, we've got the right ingredients to start. And frankly, most of us are former entrepreneurs or executives. We know our former industries pretty well, so it doesn't take a lot of due diligence to know, whether there's something in a proposition or not. And yeah, that's how raw it gets.
Yeah, and I think from the Novo Seeds perspective, the earlier you go, the higher the scientific risk there is. And we mostly do therapeutics. So we try very early on to de-risk that with the key experiments, with the most appropriate models. And here it's very important to have an all-star team that the scientists, the founders normally are, and we pair that with KOLs that are also very good to make sure that initially we get the best results that we can for the lowest amount of money possible in the very early stage. But as soon as we prove that principle, that new mechanism of action, whatever it is, then we're not really afraid of going with a bigger ticket. And we've done this in the past where our companies raised 20, 30 billion of Series A, because if that's what it takes, once the science is sort of somehow proven in good models, then if that's what it takes to move it through the clinical phases, then that's what we will do. And we normally, when we invest in a company in the therapeutic space, we like to see some genetic validation with those targets. We like to think very early on what would be the clinical development path to understand, is this going to be a trial where we need 5,000 patients across multiple sites that's going to cost us 500 million? That's going to be really hard, right? But if we can design a trial in a very smart way with a small amount of patients, very well defined, we much rather prefer that and then expand to broader indications. And again, you touched in the point of having the great teams, and that's very important. And we actively try to recruit the best. It's hard when it's very early. Getting the best people on board is very hard. We try to do that. Having the Entrepreneur in Residence program is one of the initiatives that allows us to bring great people that have experienced, sort of recycle them through this process of creating great companies. That's one part. And I think the other is the collective experience that we as Novo Seeds and the rest of the Novo Holdings team has in building companies from the very early stage to the very late stage of growth equity and whatnot, and bringing these expertise and helping the company in the board meetings go through the problems, understand how can we better empower the management team to solve these issues to move the company forward. So that's sort of our approach.
Again, we are a bit earlier. Clinical evidence would be very nice, but that's normally not what we have when we get started. We typically need IP, and we need what we call a problem-solution fit. That's what we typically check first. Is there a medical problem, and could this innovation plausibly be a solution to that problem? if that's given, then I would say we need a proof of something. It can't be just an idea, which normally isn't the case if you have IP, basically. So you always have something. You have something that has been shown, typically not yet in animals, maybe in an initial animal model, but then there's still, before you'd go into humans, 2 or 3 other steps to take. And then, I mean, you said you want to have the great teams to invest, basically. We typically start without a team, so we need to team up with someone who is passionate about it and has a sufficient background in that segment to know why he or she is passionate about it, and will take it together with us on as an entrepreneurial manager. And that's when we can get started. And then it's initially, I mean, we don't do therapeutics for some of the reasons hinted at, that typically it's huge sums of money required. And also there are players like you who actually do company building, company creation in therapeutics. In medtech, it's very medtech imaging, diagnostic, it's very fragmented. There isn't really that much venture building activity. So that's how we get started, basically. And then we go step by step, trying to raise little bits of money, possibly non-dilutive if it's possible. Match an angel investor with a state seed program, for instance. Maybe have a foundation if it's like if there's foundation sort of giving money to that type of medical problem. That's how we get started. But it's we have to be really flexible in order to get the thing off the ground to then basically hand it on to somebody.
Yeah.
Just a question on that. Do you really start also with a problem and figuring out starting to find a solution, going out and trying to bring that together in your team, for example? One has the problem, one has the solution, the third one has the team, or how does these very, very early steps in the seed field, how does it work?
I mean, there are many medical problems which all the practitioners would know about, but I guess we don't. But then we get ideas presented, like solutions to supposedly a problem. And then it sometimes happens that we like the idea and we also learn more and more about the problem, but realize it doesn't fit together. But in that process, we then of course screen what other potential solutions could there be. And then we may end up creating something for a problem which, the solution that made us look into it was initially thinking to address or aiming to address, but couldn't really. So that's, I think, how it was iterative again, I would say.
I think one of the things that's maybe different is that we do want to see a team in the beginning. So we are not structured in a way that we can bring together teams. We don't encourage people at the time when they approach us to make a big effort in bringing artificially some team together. I think that's the risk that we definitely don't want to run. We are happy to provide a missing part to the team, but we want to see more than one person approaching us. That's maybe one difference. In the other aspects, I think it's the logical things, right? We want to see some technology, we want to see some IP, but most importantly in our segment, we want to see some scalable element of this, because the first step for us is to weed out all the professorial sidekicks, I would say. So some nice company that generates €100,000 revenue a year, and it's nice for everybody, but good actually for no one. So that's really the first step. And in terms of your question of timing of entry, I think there are 3 elements which are the reasons why we want to be there really at the moment when the company is spun off. The one is that there's actually great biology scene, and when there's some Australians in the audience, I guess you will know the Vienna life science scenery. But the country doesn't have a great tradition and structures and processes of spinning out companies from universities. So it's basically a one-by-one type of activity that always needs to be negotiated with some committees and some universities. There's no standard licensing templates. It's just a cumbersome process to do that in Austria. And this is really one of the things that we really want to help and try to do this from a neutral but also from an investor perspective, obviously. And in order to be able to do that, we need to be there at that point in time. That's the one thing. The second is that everybody is familiar with university patenting. That's typically not the ideal commercial perspective on how to think about filings. Very often this has happened, and very often that also works somehow, but the earlier you can weigh in on the IP process, the better it is also from our perspective. And the third element, which is special about Austria a little bit as well, is that we have a quite well-functioning non-dilutive funding scenery that is increasingly going to equity governance, and our fund is actually set up to really complement those grant schemes and bring the equity component that's necessary, which in the first round makes it actually sensible to invest something small like 200,000-300,000 euros, which would also be the typical entry point where we come in, and then increase obviously over time, maybe with 500,000 in a seed round, and then if it really works well, that's we have to see 2 to 3 million maybe in a Series A.
Obviously, the investors of the funding or the investment vehicles are crucial, but do they have any bigger stake in the decision process, in the focus of your investments? You say that you're set up like it's ideally matching with a pre-seed governmental fund, so is that just the financial rationale, or is there any other agenda that a seed stage company need to look at when they do the due diligence of the investor?
Yeah, no, so there is no public influence, if this is what you are alluding to. To the contrary, actually, what we thought it is really necessary to bring a new institutional player to Austria. I mean, if you're familiar with the Austrian VC scene, it's nascent, I would say, right? So there are very few, and actually in this field there is no institutional player in the country, and I think the country would, and neighboring countries would warrant to have an institutional player. And I think to create something that is sustainable from a commercial perspective, it needs to be privately funded. So the way we started is we had one first private cornerstone investor in the fund, and the fund is just designed like any regular limited partnership. Obviously also open to public investors, and there are public investors investing in LP structures like EF or AWS, but that's really just on an LP basis.
What we already started discussing amongst ourselves was, and you said in Austria it's like that. I mean, how local does seed activity, seeding, seed funding have to be, or how international should it be? And you already said going up to Scotland can be a challenge, or it's a challenge to actually attract teams to certain regions in the north or whatever. But you also said you can do a proof of concept investment across Europe. Maybe some comments of you, you're both active internationally. How do you see that, the tension between being local and having to build internationally successful companies?
And Scotland is tough, I'm sure. For you.
It is. But it's just, it's an example that once you invest into specific areas, you will know in each country which universities, for instance, or town will lead in that space. So you tend to naturally gravitate there. And so that's really step number one when we invest into very specific areas. So we will almost exclusively go into the center of excellences in different countries where we know we will find the talents and the ideas that we want to back. The difficulty with early stage investing is that usually it's really the early days, and everything can go wrong. Therefore, you need to be relatively close to the investment. And being abroad, it's a natural bias. So we would always tie up with local funds, so people who know the ecosystem really, really well. We're unlikely to lead around, but we would definitely tag along on term sheets, and work with local heroes. Basically, you can help the entrepreneurs the way we would help them in the UK with networks and much more than just the check size, essentially. So we can do it, but we need the right partners in crimes, basically.
Yeah, I second your opinion. I think it's very important to have those, because creating companies is really hard, and if you're very far away, right? If I'm creating a company in San Francisco, it's going to be really hard, keep all the schedules and everything when all these problems come. So we mostly do company creation in the Nordics, and we can also do it in the rest of Europe. When we do that, we like to pair with local investors that can be closer to the entrepreneurs and be there when something is needed. And we actually have a few investments with high-tech uniforms too, so highlight that. And Novoseeds has played with all the major investors in Europe, so we think that's a very important part of the equation too.
Yes, I want to. Sure, we have some investments, or now an investment in Denmark, Finland, but also in Scotland. I need to say a rocket company, so nothing to do with healthcare. Maybe since Sabine said we are discussing already internally, maybe just the option for the audience actually to ask questions as well, and maybe one first question to the audience. So, how many entrepreneurs are there?
4.
Sure, a few, and the other ones are investors? Also, oh, that's interesting. So that's the fifth variation we have, the sixth variation we have. So any questions there already? Which topics are pressing back there?
I have one question. How to bring in these entrepreneurial managers in a seed stage where there's very little money, the risk is very high, and I think especially medical startups with an engineering background, they need very good business people. How do you bring them in?
I guess that's what we do. You need people who go for the upside, who are happy to, are also comfortable and in a position to basically work for very little cash and the equity upside in the beginning. And so basically for us, they're co-founder, they're part of the team. So, and then it's about, what is an equity stake that is relevant. We try and basically, because it's not the entrepreneur coming with the idea, it's someone we bring together, so there will be a milestone, basic component of the equity awarded, but basically it's equity. And I mean, looking at different regions, there's certainly a difference in risk appetite depending on where you go, and I think there's no surprise that NLC was started in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where this risk-taking willingness is maybe a little bit higher, and the profile of the people we work with as entrepreneurial managers, it's typically people who are at a stage in their career where they have the relevant network and expertise, and also sufficiently economically well off that they don't necessarily need a certain steady cash flow that they can basically afford. They don't need to invest huge sums of money themselves. We like it if they invest a little bit, but it's not a requirement basically. And there are quite some people who basically, also very often at the initial stage, you don't need someone full-time, so people actually can do it, have a little bit of a portfolio approach. And then, of course, one needs to see whether this is the person will continue, go full-time, or whether you need to change. That is normally not known when you start, how it goes. You want to add something?
Yeah, I'm happy for the question, because this is the one question that probably concerns us most. Particularly if you look at university spin-offs, you have teams, but you typically have teams with very little business experience. And I'm not sure we have found the right way yet. And the way we think about it is that it is, unless the situation is really exceptional, I think it's impossible to hire a rocket star CEO at that stage. I've never seen this, unless really super exceptional. So the way we go about this is that if there is a founder from the academic setting who wants to take on a CEO role, then we are happy in the beginning, and obviously if there's potential in our view, to help them to develop in that role. But it needs to be clear from the very beginning that this is a trial, right? And it could work out and the person could develop, and we are really open to that, and obviously everybody will be happy to see a person growing in such a way. But the odds are that this might not be the case, and this maybe was the right person then to do it for the first 2 years or whatever the timeline might be, but should be from the outset open to bring in other people to the team as well, and also potentially other CEOs. I think the way for us is that this is, at least from this early experience that we have now, it is easier to do this rather than trying to bring in somebody who thinks he's or she's a rocket star CEO at the very early stage. Maybe is not really, because otherwise it's unlikely to work at that stage, and then the discussion about replacing that person will be much harder. So this is the way we are thinking about that.
So in my opinion, it never stops actually. So the team, the company is evolving, so the team is evolving as well. And so normally we have also a database of persons who addressed their interest in working in a young company to us. So we have them in a database sort of, but we also have then with more than 100 exits, we also have some entrepreneurs that actually already have their network and are willing to step in again. And maybe this is something where you say you are looking at centers of excellence, so it's not only that the probability of a very good idea is a little bit higher, but maybe we can say something about the network and the cultural effect of these centers.
Oh, it's key, and we can see huge differences even in the UK between a place like Cambridge, where there's really a burgeoning ecosystem for the startups, and next door in Oxford, which is way more academic in the way the university structures IP with startup, etc. They have had less exits, so you can see the difference with the amount of support successful entrepreneurs are bringing back into the system. There are 2 or 3 very large groups of angels, for instance, competing on deals, which is really good for us to see. We've got co-investors in them, basically. They bring a lot of support to the companies, chairing them, mentoring them, etc. And that's really what the model we like. Personally, going back to the questions, that we don't need to have someone with a CEO title in the early days, especially if it's a true startup. There's another 2-3 years of bench work required. It's really irrelevant. We also, as much as possible, try to avoid the discussions that you've hinted as to, founders may be good at certain things and less at others, because at the end of the day, we genuinely back the founders. We want that person to feel engaged, throughout. It's going to be a bumpy ride, and he or she needs to be in the lead, definitely. So putting a title too quickly may force someone into, specific boxes. And so what we like is the model, for instance, of the executive chairman. The founding team will very naturally usually split the jobs among themselves, and they can pick the titles that they want as long as the outcome is there. But you need the experience, the agile supervision, and when you have the right executive chairman, advisor, call it what you want, it really works well. It allows the team to have someone which is friendly, on board, on their side, so to say, with whom they can have the candid discussion as to how to structure a deal, where to raise money next. Can I work with my current investors, a group of investors? Should I broaden the syndicate? I mean, there's so many open questions that first-time entrepreneurs would have. And therefore, we're relatively relaxed in terms of structure. As long as we know there is some supervision in the room, and some founders emerge as natural entrepreneurs and really want to drive it from an executive standpoint. Others are genuinely missing the labs and are very happy to reposition as CSO, or sometimes just let the baby fly on his own, basically, and get external help. So. And we've been surprised, many times, and therefore I think the default position is let's just nature do its thing and see who emerges as a natural leader in the team.
Yeah, you just said angels competing for deals in Cambridge. That sounds like heaven indeed. Can you send some over, or let's briefly maybe discuss also the role of angels, which also from our perspective, it's crucial indeed for us at that really very risky, wild initial stage to have someone. And I also know High Tech Gründerfund, you have a specific program for working with angels. So let's maybe discuss this role a little bit, because that's also the one early stage investor whom we haven't represented on the panel.
Yeah, I like the terminus of executive chairman, which we don't normally have. So it's not, you have the CEO, never have co-CEOs, doesn't work. But you have the CEO, and then you have advisors or investors, and but have an executive chairman, or at least position somebody with the idea of having an executive chairman. That's always a good thing. So at High Tech Gründerfund, in the life science field, we don't see that angels are competing against each other. Unfortunately, not. We see a little bit in the IT field in Berlin. So temperatures are rising. And But what we try to do, since we have sometimes or be together with the team for 2 or 3, even 3 years before our seed funding, that we try to bring somebody. You said it as that knows the market real well. So having somebody that is actually deep into the business, it doesn't need to be full time, but needs to be on an advisor base, maybe even a very early small ticket seed angel. So that is actually really helpful. On the other side, in High-Tech Gründer, so we have a portfolio of 270 companies right now. So we have quite a good view on the market, or we are the market. We have a good view on the market, and we see that, or for us, angels are more important than the national venture capital industry. So they contribute this really significant amount of cash into our portfolio. So from 400 million funding that goes into our portfolio from third parties, they have more than 40, so more than 10%. And so that actually shows the importance of having angels. And as Sabine said, yes, we have a circle also of private investors that are typically very experienced and very successful entrepreneurs themselves, and so they come in the next circle then to us. And maybe how do you find these angels, or what can you do in actually bringing together the entrepreneurs and the angels?
So first of all, they are becoming very well structured as a sub industry. Essentially, there are a number of groups that were their websites. I mean, you need to want to miss them really. So they are hiding at conferences as well, and they're just looking for the deals. And typically, once an angel has found a team that he or she really wants to back, they come back home and sell it to their partnerships. Frankly, is very similar to the way we would bring back deals to the rest of the room at Amadeus, for instance. And some groups are organized so that everybody invests in the same pot, basically, and it becomes one line on the cap table. For others, it's really a pick and choose. Every individual can then decide to tag individually into an investment and have his or her line on it. So. And then they vary in size, frankly. We've got groups who will do minimum to £3 million, and others will do 20K. So it depends again on who you talk to.
Question in the audience.
I have a question, if I may ask.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of the template that you were talking about. I came out of a university, became a founder, became an entrepreneur, and now a CEO running a company in Sweden. And I hear this thing about angels competing. It sounds like Narnia to me. I mean, so how do startups that are not located in UK or Ireland, Scotland or Germany can get a part of that scene? Because I cannot relocate my team from Sweden to that country, but I would like to be part of that ecosystem somehow. So how does that work?
I think that there's a lot of angels in Sweden. We see a lot of companies at Novo, and there's really a lot of angels. So.
Yeah, but they're very market specific in the sense that we are more of a consumer tech, med tech kind of thing, but the angels in Sweden are very biotech and pharma oriented because of AstraZeneca driving it forward.
Yeah.
So I would like to be part of these scenes in Cambridge or Germany, and I'm wondering how do we do that?
Maybe I was over-exaggerating or not exact, so precise enough. So we see it in the IT field because there are more angels that think that they understand what's going on in the specific target. And I'm totally with you in the field that are intermediate, digital health, IT, medtech. There hasn't been these numbers of successful companies that exited successfully. So the numbers of angels that really are deep into the topic and are having rather deep pockets are also small. But I guess you will have, maybe you need to define what you actually need. Do you need somebody that understands what you're doing and brings you with deep market knowledge forward? Or do you need somebody that also has deep pockets? And maybe the combination is really difficult to find, and maybe choose the one or the other, because I think from the scene in Sweden you will have lots of people that actually understand what you are heading for and might be able to support you in advisory role or even full-time. So, but I think the difficulty is to define actually the profiles of the different stakeholder and what they should be ideally providing to your plan. And that's indeed a difficult thing. And maybe ask the investors, because all active angels go to investors and collaborate with investors. I have co-investments with investors. So they, as investor, you're typically a touch point or a crystallization point for certain your own networks that overlap with other investors.
Yeah. I think you need to find your champion. Actually, that's really, really important. Find an angel or an investor, who really connects, likes it, but the only missing bit is essentially having more money around the table or set of expertise that they don't have, and they become your ambassador. Once we fall in love with deals, we open every possible doors and line up people, and until we have the right group around the table, and that could be someone local to where you are, who essentially will become the contact point for other investors, when it comes to that deal, who will then even come to meetings with you, etc., depending on the relationship you build. But you don't have to have all the money, where you live, basically. But you need that one guy or person who will help you put it together. And then again, showing that you can access talents and money, etc., despite being in more exotic places, possibly for your industry, is again a positive. So, but you'll have to travel. You have to do what you're doing today, going to conferences until you find the right touch points, and they are there all around. We all know people who know people, and eventually you'll get to that one who will become the lead. It's called a lead for a reason. It's more than just a term sheet. We're putting the rounds, and we know what's missing. We know where you're going to be in 2 years, and where we've got the skill set, or we don't, and therefore we'll bring guys who've been there, done it, who know possibly the geography more than we do. So when there's a will, there's a way.
So I think we're out of time. So be a champion, find a champion, and do a lot of networking and talking to people, and start right here throughout the rest of the day. And good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Already on.
Thank you.